speaking of that game, we are going to move on now and look at what is the opening day game, the beginning of Six Nations 2022, Ireland hosting Wales at the Aviva Stadium in Dublin. This is taking place Saturday, February 5th. This coming Saturday, it's in Dublin, as we know, local time kickoff 2:15 in the afternoon to kick the Six Nations off. Jaco Piper is going to be taking the game, fresh off his controversial performance in the Ulster Scarlets game. And
that's right.
Well, he'll be eager to give red cards now after all that criticism. So watch out, Irish players, I dare say.
Indeed.
And they've got Matthew Raynal and Angus Gardner on the sidelines with Stuart Turheege of England in the TMO box. And yeah, this is a game that obviously needs very little introduction. It's become one of the more intense rivalries of the last decade.
It's always been an intense rivalry, just going way back, but particularly during the pro era, just like even when one of the teams is ahead of the other in terms of development, a defeat to the other is never too far away. It feels like you can, like the momentum is often checked by these kind of Celtic clashes which do happen annually. But both sides know each other very well, playing in club rugby together as well, URC or Pro 14 or 16 as it was before. So they get a lot of exposure to each other. Obviously off the back of Lions Tour last year, there's a bit more of that dynamic as well. Some players who know each other very well from that only recently. But it's a familiarity breeds contempt kind of thing, you know. You once the whistle goes, there's no love lost between the two.
And jealousy. You'll never hear any fans give out about one another's teams as much as the Irish and the Welsh when one of them is doing well.
Yes,
the level of begrudgery that goes on when one side is above the other is totally true, because we feel like we're of a kind, you know, similar sized places, and with similar rugby traditions. Ireland, obviously, the side that comes into this with the most form.
That's true.
They're coming in off an 8-game win streak in which they've averaged 45 points a game. Insane return over the last 8 games. They've played some scintillating offensive footy.
That's been kind of the main thing. It's just the stylistic change, which is informed by that manner of scoring that they were doing as well, racking up the scores they did like twice against Japan in the last year, as well as obviously those All Blacks games.
The USA, but even 50 on Argentina easily.
And that was the week after a kind of an All Blacks game that could have deflated, and a lot of changes could have been chop and change, but it was a very good performance
It was well balanced. It had a lovely tempo enforced by Gibson Park taking the jersey at 9.
True.
It had bred the brilliance of Johnny Sexton in for those big games, guiding the offence, and the supreme footballing ability of the forward pack, which has given them an edge in every forward battle that they've had in the last couple of years.
That Porter, Kelleher, Furlong axis to start with, and then the guys are springing off the bench, but just the footballing ability and physicality of those guys means that it's a bit less of an all-about Sexton kind of show, and in terms of the offence.
He puts them through the holes, but they can play off each other, and it's been thrilling to watch. It's been brilliant. Just to see these really talented athletes express themselves, and they've been a point of difference for Ireland. So obviously they come in on a high ebb. It's important to note, broadly speaking, just looking at their tournament outlook as a whole, that of those 8 games, 6 of them were at home.
That's
the 2 away wins that they had in that 8-game win streak, one was away in Italy, you kind of write that off. The other one was against Scotland, and it was a 27-24 win in which they did dominate, but were imperfect and did, as this team does, leak some tries.
Yeah.
And in that sense, you know, there's definitely scope for improvement and scope for concern, given that Ireland's season, you know, putting this game to one side, as important as it is, and starting with a loss here is pretty catastrophic for their plans, having to go to Paris and Twickenham. But it is those away games, 5 big away games, to define a season here for Ireland, outside of the Aviva Stadium, away from their comfort zone. They go to Paris, obviously, week 2, England week 4, and then 3 tests in July, 2 in Auckland and 1 in Wellington against the All Blacks.
Very, very tough as away calendar fixtures go. That's pretty, really tough. But yeah, you're right in saying their season will probably be defined by those results and those fixtures as much as anything else, and just the performances away from home.
Well, exactly. They're brilliant in the Aviva Stadium. No team wants to come to Dublin, and that'll probably factor into why they're such heavy favourites here in this game. But the World Cup's not going to be played in the Aviva Stadium. The World Cup's going to be played in France, and Ireland are going to have to be able to rack up similar performances to what they did over the last 8 games away from home before you can truly refer to them as a complete team, and that'll be interesting to see play out as the tournament goes on. But obviously, this game comes first, and it feels like obviously it's an important year for Ireland. You know, no trophies yet under Andy Farrell, 1 year out from a World Cup. A good confidence, but a new confidence in some sense, and potentially one that can be undone by bad results. this feels like a very important game for them to maintain their rhythm, to not come unstuck, and to come into the French game next week as fresh and as well prepared as possible.
That's true, yeah, and momentum as well, which is so key to both of these sides. Like, results do nothing better than just a win, no matter how scrappy, for just bolstering a campaign. And like, Wales are illustrative of that. Like, they're a team that can live or die by momentum, particularly in this tournament. Like, we've seen they are a team that can do a wooden spoon one year and then a Grand Slam the next, just depending on how some of these results fall in the first couple of weeks. And an away scalp in Dublin for them would be massive and start their campaign off
completely flip the narrative. They can completely flip the narrative with one big performance, and they are good at digging out one big performance in this competition, perhaps like nobody else. The most successful Six Nations team of the past decade. They've won 6 of the last 17 tournaments, which is pretty insane. 2 of the last 3 as well, including a Grand Slam.
And I think they were 5th favourites going into like 4 of them.
Yeah, well, indeed, it is often coming off the back of a fallow year. Obviously, this time coming off the back of a good tournament last year, followed by a bit of a downward spiral. Obviously, the injuries are going to play their part. They're missing some seriously big names: Alan Wynne-Jones, Ken Owens, Justin Tipperick, Toby Falatau, Josh Navidi, like a real meat of that pack, along with guys like George North in the back line as well.
Which is why, as a case of like kind of last Dan standing, Dan Biggar has been named captain for this campaign, and he is one of the only elder statesmen of that. Like, there's a massive list that you just rattled off, and it is a concern. It is like Wales Online and a lot of Welsh kind of publications are citing it. It is a problem. A lot of their guys, those guys that were looking so lethal last year in that offence that was just digging out tries with only 30 or 40% of the possession, those guys aren't there anymore. So
some of them are. This is the thing. People forget they had injuries last year as well. They were kind of written off last year for similar reasons.
And the other thing is, like, the age profile of those guys with injuries is such that it's like they are getting on, and that's partly where these niggles come from. So discovering what the younger generation looks like as a team and how they perform is part of the mission for this tournament and for the next kind of 18 months or so leading into the World Cup. That's where Wales are at in terms of transitioning. They'll still want some of those guys there, but they don't want to be leaning quite so heavily and reliant on them. So this will be a big litmus test, this tournament, for them in terms of just blooding a lot of new talent at international level.
Yeah, no question, absolutely, and it could be beneficial ultimately. Who knows? They haven't beaten Ireland now in Dublin since the 2015 World Cup warm-ups. They haven't actually had a win in the Six Nations in Dublin since 2012, so as good as their record has been against the Irish in Cardiff, the Aviva Stadium, as it does for so many teams, proves a very tough nut to crack.
It is tough.
One of the tougher places, becoming one of the tougher places to come in World Rugby, which is obviously encouraging from our point of view. But for Wales, obviously that's something they'll look to rectify. At their best, they have wonderful smarts. They have a wonderful clutch ability to dig out points when they need them.
And good game sense and recognition as well. Like they when they arrive to the pitch, they're dogged and determined and pretty accurate and disciplined. Exactly. Like they manage to, even when you feel they're outmatched and creaking at scrum time, they're very good at staying just the right side of the legality on that. Similarly, at the breakdown, they can make your ball an absolute mess and a scrap, but just about legally, and very frustrating for a team who's trying to play quick to deal with.
I remember the 2018 Grand Slam year that Ireland had, which Wales were probably the toughest opponents that Ireland had that year. And they were completely blown away up front, as is often the case with Irish opponents. Completely blown away, dominated for possession. Ireland well worth their lead. And then in the blink of an eye, try. All of a sudden it was a 1-score game, a 3-point game in fact in the last play. And then they threw an intercept pass to Stockdale, which, if the pass had stuck and got outside him, might have been the winning of the game. But, people kind of forget Ireland won the Grand Slam. It goes on the scoreboard as a 10-point win and you move on. But Wales is a very, very dangerous team and can outdo the Irish for clinicality, so they'll have to look at that. Moving on just to the teams, just to look at the broad sort of previews from each team's point of view. We're going to start with the hosts, that is Ireland, hosting the opening game, and we're just going to look at how each team might be approaching the game and what their chances are. I'm going to start just with the squad as well. Unfortunately, just the timing of this, we're shooting this on Wednesday. You guys are going to know the squad. We actually don't have the match day squad in front of us. And there are some question marks over it. I think most of the team is settled. You're not going to get many surprises. You're likely to have that all flying forward pack of Porter, Kelleher and Furlong. Big Ian Henderson's a bit of a
There's
doubt.
question marks over both Henderson and James Ryan, who both returned to training. I'd assume one of them, if not both, will start. I suspect James Ryan's probably the one who's slightly closer from what I'm hearing in terms of rumblings. There's Tyg Byrne as an option in there at lock to start, which I suspect might happen if they're uncertain about both of them. There's also guys like Ryan Baird who are good value for it. If not off the bench, then I wouldn't mind seeing guys like him thrown out. Especially because Wales will be fielding a team in the absence of Alan Wynne, and they're
exactly.
Talent,
it's a concerning matchup against the likes of the French pack with Willemse and Taufi Fanua. If you're going with someone like a Tyg Byrne who doesn't have that kind of tight head locking strength, but I would have no concerns about picking him against Wales. In fact, I think on form you have to pick him against Wales somewhere, because he's been everywhere. He's been brilliant on both the offense and defensive side, relentlessly playmaking, so agile, in wonderful form, just coming up with play after play after play for Munster, and he would feed so well off what Ireland are trying to do. Putting Tyg Byrne on a field with the likes of Johnny Sexton, linking with the likes of Conan and Furlong, enhances what he does.
Draws Welsh eyeballs because they respect the hell out of him. From his time over at Scarlets, where he made his name really before coming over to Munster, he was just a demon for them. So they know all about that blue scrum cap and the nightmares he can cause.
Although the trade off there is, are you going to have the same strength at scrum time? And that is a possible concern if you pick him at lock, especially with the likes of Ryan Baird. Hopefully Big Ian Henderson's back, but I think there's a good chance he won't be, but James Ryan probably will be, as you say. In the back row, you're not going to...
There's horses for courses thing. There's a lot, as with always the case with the Irish back row. There is the Leinster back row, which is the incumbent back row, which is your Doris, your Conan and your Josh van der Fleer, which is probably the likely front.
And then you've
O'Mahony.
That's your four.
Those are your four. It's just what kind of combination you have. And then behind that, like if one of them goes down over the course of the campaign, there's a lot of really good talent.
Yeah, Nick Timoney can come in. I think he'd be the next guy to come in, but absolutely.
Or as you say, Tyg Byrne at 6, and then on you go.
Yeah, and Gavin Coombs even can get a look in. But it's definitely there's positive and strength there. Back line also, Gibson Park, we like to think, has taken this 9 jersey. Hopefully he's going to be in with Sexton. That's obviously been a fulcrum part of what Ireland are trying to do with the ball, is having those two on the field, generating both tempo and direction. And then in the midfield, you've got some question marks. I think it's an interesting selection at midfield. Your bookie favourite is Henshaw Ringrose.
Yeah.
There are cases to be made for
outside case of Aki Henshaw, then there's Aki Ringrose. The combinations of all those three are the incumbents.
And yet, personally, if you asked me to pick the team, I would probably pick Henshaw Hume.
There you go.
I would probably put Hume in there. I think Hume has done a little more than Ringrose this year. Ringrose's form has improved. Yeah. His defensive reading is as good as ever. He's got that speed off the line.
Clatter he put in on Geordie Barrett might hold him in good sway in terms of the test match experience that tends to sway these things.
In recent weeks, he's had some missed tackles again, and he creep into his game when he's trying to get out of the line and make plays. He does miss the odd tackle. And on the offensive side, he's good. He's been better this year than he was last year. He's a little more straight. He does have those talents. But Hume has been the sparkling one. And Hume, working with Jared Payne out in Ulster from a defensive point of view, really enjoyed what he's doing from a defensive reading point of view in that position. He's been one of the best in Europe. He's shutting down plays from everywhere. He just has a lovely feel for the defensive game and very solid skill set in offense. So personally, I'm comfortable throwing him in there. I want to see what he can do at test level. I think he's a real threat to Ringrose now, Hume. For sure.
I would like to think so. I think, like, for himself and a few others in that capacity, I think it might be the Italy game that you see them just going on Irish.
That's nothing though. But for me, that's nothing.
Just going on the kind of evidence of what Ireland tend to do in these scenarios. I would say that they will lean on test match experience to decide these things. Even though I kind of agree with you, there should be space for particularly in the back line like that. For guys to just be chucked in, like especially on the wing. But guys who are lighting it up at 13, we need to see more options as well. Like definitely, I will be annoyed if he doesn't get any minutes against any team other than Italy.
Yeah, I know. I just think he might, but they probably will go with Henshaw Ringrose for this game. Wings are as interesting. Fullback is obviously Hugo Keenan. He's been relentlessly
James
solid.
Lowe is not in is one of the stories of it. So that opens the door for a fair few other guys who are putting their hands up in the background. Sticking with Ulster, you have little Lowry and Balakoon as well, are front runners there. That I think like Balakoon's been excellent. Lowry obviously has been catching headlines the last few weeks. And there's also Mac Hansen of Connacht, who's been brilliant all season. He's in the squad. And there's Larmer from our neck of the woods, who'll be in contention for the right wing. There's Conway, who I think is a front runner, and Keith Earls as well, who's still in the squad. So there's a lot of depth there as well, and there's a lot of combinations you can field from those guys. I'm not entirely certain which one they're going to go with for this.
Yeah,
Welsh
I'm
one.
very, very unsure. The rumour mill is circling, and Farrell likes form, and Farrell likes what he sees in training. And the rumour mill, i.e. some stuff I read on Twitter,
Yes, indeed.
says that maybe Mac Hansen has a chance
Nice.
to get in, because he's been the most impressive player in training.
He's been the most impressive player on the field as well, arguably, in terms of what he does for Connacht out of nothing.
He's extremely explosive. What I love about him is he's like an NFL running back who just somehow comes up with 10 yards when there's no space. That's the kind of player he is, where there'll just be 3 or 4 players around him, and he'll just have the strength to get past one, the footwork to get past another, the speed to get past another. In no space, he'll make the right decisions and come up with freaky meters.
Yeah, he does that going backwards as well, which is as
Yeah.
impressive for test level stuff as well. It's not just when he's scoring tries, but when the ball's kicked in behind Connacht and he has to deal with those scruffy sports ground balls, he does that very expertly as well. So
correct. My concern is he's a bit short, he comes up with mistakes, and Bigger and Wales are so good at making you pay if you're not defensively at the level.
That is
I remember Dan Sheehan for Leinster just turning him upside down on that wing one-on-one. Or Sheehan's quick and he was deceptively so, but I mean he rinsed him with a step on the inside. Those are little concerns that would make me hesitant. Like it's
lining up opposite of Louis Rees-Zammit or
correct.
something. Yeah.
And I know he would be like, or Josh Adams potentially. Lovely.
Yeah.
So there's deep concern there from a defensive point of view that might stand against him. Personally, I think I would run the risk with Balakoon. I love the balance and
I was going to say I agree with that. I think just in terms of his size, that will stand him in better stead, because they do tend to favour players that aren't vertically challenged, and if all things being equal, they'll pick the bigger man for aerial reasons generally, they're not entirely unreasonable at test level, but sometimes there's a bit of slack to that, like as in you want the kind of jinking footwork. You can see what Cheslin Colby does for the Springboks, but guys like Larmour, like little Lowry, like Mac Hansen, all very evasive small runners, probably with better cardio for the long game as well, very dangerous in the last quarters as much as anything else, but on balance, they tend to favour the taller heads. I think Conway might be a front runner given his great form in autumn as well. Yeah. He was really, really good against the All Blacks.
There's every chance it'll be Earls Conway, and our imaginations will be shut down in that way. But listen, it's a horses for courses one, and those wingers' jerseys are very much up for grabs. They are. So the hope for Ireland
is that the one that's been nailed down in the back three is Hugo Keenan over the last 12 months, and he has really nailed down that 15 jersey, and there's not even a whiff of anyone else really coming in close to claiming it.
I also like Lowry as a bench option.
I do too. He covers 10ish and 15 and wing. So
every position in the back line potentially he can cover, and he's explosive. He can chase a game. I'd love if they picked him in the 23 shirt. Although I suspect maybe Hansen if the rumour mill is to be believed. But listen, moving on from that team, just as far as how Ireland want to try and approach this game and want to try to get the best of Wales. Basically the game starts for me with the midfield offence. I mean, Ireland have been really, really refreshing in terms of their capacity to attack from anywhere. If you look back at some of those games, it is just starting from the midfield. They'll receive a kick,
starting from their own 10 metre and moving back and forth. And not only are they starting from different quadrants, but they're using the full width, which was a criticism cited of Joe Schmidt-Arden towards the end, that they would only work not only in 1 or 2 pass plays out from the ruck. They'd work within the 15 metres, and as soon as they get to within the 15 metres, they just work back the other way, and it's not the full field that they're using.
I was concerned about the risk involved in playing on those tram lines.
Pretty
close to the touchline there.
How effective
might lose position.
How effective guys like Jack Conan can be out there, or even Peter O'Mahony, who plays for an Ulster or for a Munster team that are a bit devoid of creativity, but he's a baller out in the wide channels as well. You want to be able to kind of get those ball playing forwards with their hands on the ball with options out there, and try and test this Welsh defence as much as you can, because it'll be chop and change. There's rumours about Josh Adams perhaps covering 13 for them. They don't quite know what their backline will be as far as a certain thing. You want to test it with what you've been doing.
The midfield defence for Wales has come up with some really, really weak performances in recent times, even in last year's Six Nations at times. You want to see them go for guys like Halahola or Tompkins, or even a Josh Adams at 13, just to open up the field from an offensive point of view. But from Ireland's point of view, you're thinking, if you can get good ball, if Wales are going to kick it to you, if you're receiving a kick or starting a set piece, you want to move the ball, you want to test the midfield. They've used pods brilliantly in the last couple of months, or the run in towards the end of last season. They've had forwards basically everywhere on the field, completely interspersed with the back line, always with an option left or right, running little screens and little loops off Sexton picking the right man, and then just when the right man gets the ball, picking the right line. very often he's winning his contact. He's got another man on his inside, another man on his outside. There's a chance to offload. There's a chance to really explode. And there's so many balls.
There's also what was generally good is that even in the performance against the All Blacks, say, where they were having to go through lots of phases because they weren't actually as quick as the All Blacks. So as much as they were kind of getting outside them, they were getting shut down by scramble and going again. So you were seeing 10, 12, 20 phases.
Like eventually.
Yeah, and they had no issue resourcing the offensive breakdown, despite the fact that they were running more aggressive pattern lines. Like, they were still there, and they were still hitting rucks very efficiently on the offensive side, which is good, because that was one of the learnings from the whole Joe Schmidt campaign, was how to accurately clear out your own breakdown ball. And it's good that they haven't sacrificed that entirely, but there's a bit more scope. So you want to see them play with both that freedom and that accuracy. And then, it comes down to things like collision zone, which will be very telling in the first quarter, as it always is, when the crowd are raucous, when you're in your home stadium for the first time in the 2022 season. How up for it are you going to be in those big collisions either side of the ball in the first 20 minutes? Those things will probably decide how this game will go. Wales will be there to try and stymie them, try and chop, try and get in and disrupt their ball, try and make sure that Gibson Park can't be clearing rucks in 1 or 2 seconds, tries to make it more like 5. So it'll be on us and to be accurate enough and deceptive and brave enough to kind of ask enough questions to kind of exert that pressure and ultimately have their own way by being proactive.
Yeah, exactly. You looked at that All Blacks game, and the All Blacks were patiently good in defence, and it didn't quite happen for Ireland, but they stuck to their guns. They kept trying to move the ball, they kept finding the edge, they kept looking for entrances, and eventually it was just like a simple little pop pass on the inside.
That Keelan Doris try was like very simple by the end. Like, if you just look at it in isolation, you're thinking that's a bad missed tackle from the All Blacks, but it's only the context of they've made like 300.
Yeah, exactly. And it keeps coming at them from different directions. There's always a brilliant ball carrier to bring down, whether the last man to carry is a big Ian Henderson, as it was, or a Tyg Furlong, or a Jack Conan, or a Peter O'Mahony, and then all of a sudden this guy Daragh, who you probably didn't do much tape on, who other teams will have, bursts through and finds the try. That's the really encouraging and refreshing thing from this Irish offence against a Wales team that will kick to them. So if they can recover ball and attack from there and have success against the Wales defence, punch holes, be secure in possession. Obviously, that's so important against a good jacking team.
Battle is very often.
Yeah, and sticking your offloads, not going wild on the offloading side. Like we've seen Leinster some weeks just go a little turbocharged on the offloads. Same guys just trying to make magic happen when they don't need to, when they're winning enough contacts. If Ireland can be disciplined in that regard, make good decisions, win good ground, they have a good chance of dominating most of the possession and finding scores and leaving Wales harmed in that area.
Yeah, and then the flip side is what happens without the ball, because you're right in citing, like, it was a great year revolutionising the offence, which was the main point of concern. It really was, because we were just so blunt and so bludgeoning for quite a while that it had to be reformed, especially when you see just the way that Connacht play the game, the way that Ulster try and play the game, the way that Leinster play the game at a club level. It made no sense that we were quite rudimentary on the offensive side. So 12 months on, it feels like that has been revolutionised. But what was true even before we revolutionised our offence was we were still dominating games in terms of possession. The pack were still doing a lot of work, and we were still leaking tries in the 30-odd% possession that the opponents had. That remains true even as a result of those great results last autumn. Even we were leaking a few in those games, particularly the All Blacks, when they weren't in with the sniff, and then they suddenly were in with the score.
It remains a concern.
Wales are a team of that mould that can do that to you.
Totally, and it's Andy Farrell's brief. I mean, every one of those tries that the All Blacks scored against us, Wales could easily score against us. Yeah. And you think of the first try. Geez, who got it? I can't remember, but it was Papali'i made the break. I'm not even Cody Taylor. I can't remember who actually got the score.
I can't remember.
But it was Papali'i made the break off the line. It was right after Ireland had a tough call and a disallowed try, and the All Blacks punted it up the field, and then Ireland kind of switched off. I think it was Kelleher switched off. He was at the tail of the line out, took his eyes off the ball, and there they went straight through, big gap. Shouldn't have happened, and the All Blacks, being as good as they are, just found the try. The next one, yes, it's an exceptional Will Jordan play. Will Jordan's one of the exceptional players.
We have Louis Zaman out there, and
equally
he
exceptional.
Can do that stuff.
Ireland never look worse than when they're on the turn. Little kicks in behind, little dangerous moments like that when they're slow, when they're flat-footed. That is a concern, and they look slow.
As far as out and out pace goes, and we were even when we're rattling through the wing options, like, it's not quite there. Like, with the exception of Jordan Conroy, the sevens lad, we don't really see like out and out super fast wingers that you see in other parts of the world. Doesn't tend to be Ireland, and then that kind of ripples through the whole back line, 13 for 13, 12 for 12, and then as a balance, the whole back line, while defensively quite sound when they're organised, when it's discombobulated a little and you have to scramble, it's tough to make it up when you're a yard of pace short.
And Wales are a team that's designed to exploit those errors.
Yeah.
And so it's from Ireland's point of view, it's on the defender of that 13 channel, which is why I'm tempted to go with Hume. But a combination of that guy, be it Ringrose probably, and Henshaw, to shut down the outside and make things really, really difficult for Wales. Like when Ireland are defensively good, and it's important to remember there's a balance here, they are very good, because in parts of that All Black game, they rendered the All Blacks impotent. In fact, most of it. Yeah. All the All Blacks were trying to set up wide moves by going infield, but Ireland, through Josh van der Fleer and those wonderful forwards, were coming out of the line, shutting things down, chop tackling, driving guys back down, and making it really, really tough to move the ball and access those wide channels. And that still, for Ireland, is their bread and butter defensively. Stop them from getting outside them, put Bigger under as much pressure as possible, don't give him anything, do not give him time to look up and assess and find a crossfield kick. That pressure is still Ireland's best weapon to prevent teams from getting outside them.
It's true, but it does, as you say, it does have a tendency to flip and cough it up, so that will be a work on for them, just in terms of your average. We were looking at it in the context of the Springboks when we were covering the Rugby Championship, and just before going into last year, how few tries they were conceding per game, and it was like down at 1 on average per game, or slightly less than, after like several months coming from the World Cup, and it was just freaky good. And then ourselves on that stat sheet, it's closer to 3, 3 to 4 that we're coughing up, and it's like, if we're not scoring enough to counter that, then that's how you're losing games. That's how they lost in last time we played France in Dublin, was a loss similar to that, dominate all the possession, still cough up 2 tries in the 2 chances that they have, and that's the game, thanks very much. As you were saying, Wales are just a team that can exploit that in you. So that little work on from a defensive point of view for Ireland is one that I'm keen to see addressed.
And the whole backfield, it's going to be potentially a new partnership in the backfield. Bigger is, especially if they're losing contacts, going to be looking to the aerial game himself. Liam Williams, those boys, they're going to be looking to put the ball up and threaten and try and recover possession. Huge point of focus for Ireland. And likewise, the set piece, they can't underestimate Wales. It's a platform for Ireland. It can be a strength for Ireland if they get that power
offensive
going
mauling and aggressive scrummaging as well, because that dynamic front row that they've gone with now, with Porter shifting to the loose head, it is very explosive, and it can be very, very domineering up front. And you'd think on paper it's a matchup that looks good for Ireland, but as is always the case, Wales are niggly and combative, and very often manage to make it more of a scrap than you think it ought to be. And then if you allow that to frustrate you, then that's when Wales can get in your heads and in the refs' heads, and then suddenly things can start to unravel from there. So the set piece will be fascinating.
They'll like their matchups elsewhere. They'll only really go to aggressive set piece play if things are going against them. But it's important that they don't get their pants pulled down in that area. They'll have to have a disciplined line out. Big job on whoever's in calling instead of Biggie and Henderson to get that right.
And on Kelleher's arrows as well, which are sometimes a little skewed. They're probably still the only little question mark about his capacity to do everything at test level, because apart from that, he does pretty much everything at test level to a high level. So just want to be accurate in those areas. And the restart, which is another one. If you are going to be accruing points with 3-pointers and stuff, you can't afford to just drop restarts when you do that generally. So things like that being tidy. But by and large, Ireland's plan, as you were highlighting at the start, is to try and keep that momentum. It's an 8-game win streak. It's playing some lovely stuff. There's a kind of a consensus of kind of that across the Irish media sentiment around it. As I was listening, is just like, it's been great, can we keep going? That's exactly. kind of the long and the short of it, it's like, I have no complaints. It's been very, very good. Can we keep doing it? And that is the question.
And adjust to teams' adjustments. Teams are going to have tape on what they're doing over the last 8 games.
As we were saying, there's still work-ons all through, which was kind of what was encouraging about it last year, and that was those were the rumblings coming from their camp as well, is that they're not done. They're not nearly finished as a team.
You're never perfect. I mean, they for a brief moment after 2018, they thought they were perfect, and the second they rested on their laurels, the team went and caught them. It's literally the second. It was England.
And we were saying going into last season and going into the last few Six Nations, just how close the top 5 are, and just it's minor little things in the matches that'll decide the results, but also just in terms of rates of progress, like one team shoots ahead briefly, but then it's only a short matter of time before they're reined in by the rates of progress of everyone else. So you got to keep developing, kind of keep building, and that is Ireland's mission statement for 2022.
No question, but we're going to move on and look at Wales and their best method for winning the game. The defending champions. Right. They aren't carrying momentum into this year's Six Nations. They have yet again been ruled out, and people obviously making a huge deal of the injuries, which are a massive factor when it comes to Wales.
It's hard to not knock that. Like, there is a cavalcade of injured legends in there, and it's going to be tough for any squad like that to be cohesive without them.
But rather than looking at the names that there aren't, I would look at the names that there are.
Indeed.
Wyn Jones, first of all, and Thomas Francis. Like, if you look at what Thomas Francis is doing for Ospreys, the guy's doing bits. He's winning scrums every week. He's winning penalties. Wyn Jones, we know, wily operator at his best. Very solid
place on the Lions based on a great showing last season as well. Yeah.
Indeed. Adam Beard, vice captain this year. Huge job for him. Obviously, Lions caliber player. Last year he was brilliant. And then a cavalcade of guys in the back row in Tane Basham, who had a brilliant autumn.
He did.
Guys like Ellis Jenkins, we know, can come above themselves, play well. Jack Morgan's had a pretty great time of it in Ospreys. Aaron Wainwright is an established guy. Ross Moriarty. It's a solid list of back row options that they have. Those guys on their day can be brilliant. True. And then you look at the back line, and honestly, of these 16 backs in their squad, there isn't a weak player among them. I love their scrum half options. Gareth Davis, Kieran Hardy, Thomas Williams.
All very, very good.
Quick, offensive, similar-minded. All of those scrum halves, especially Thomas Williams and Gareth Davis, they can also be game breakers. They can take tries. They can catch on quick taps. They run great support lines. They're scorers. At 10, obviously, you've bigger captaining. You've got Anscombe and Priestland and Sheedy also in there as potential options.
Potential to move the back line around.
That's a pretty healthy supply. Bigger will start, but they'll probably use that bench pretty well. And then in the midfield, you've got the likes of Halaholo, Tompkins, Jonathan Davis, Watkin. People are talking about Josh Adams. And in that back three, Cuthbert, Louis Rees-Sammet, Johnny McNichol and Liam Williams. That's elite. Like that back three calibre that they have is elite. They can take tries, they can play with real speed. They have the speed advantage over Ireland.
They definitely do.
And so I think that the player for player, like a lot of people focusing on the guys who are missing instead of the guys who are there. Especially in the back line, there's a really quality team.
There is, and there's certainly a team built to take tries when they're there. And considering Ireland's penchant for just coughing them up in little idle moments in test matches, and Wales's pedigree for just being the team that is the more clinical with less of the ball, it's teed up for exactly that. When you know that you're gonna have to pick a younger kind of age profile of backline than you're maybe used to, but still with that gives you license to be a bit gung-ho. And that was in the first season of PVAC, we saw a bit of that, where the results didn't necessarily go his way in all of them, but still grabbed some scintillating tries. I'm thinking that one to start the second half against England, when they just caught the restart, 2 passes, and then it's under the post, coast to coast straight away. And it's like they are well capable of that. And that list of backs that you just read out, they could definitely do that to Ireland in one
difference-making play potential, and they all have it.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a mouthful, but they, like, you know what I mean. They all have the ability to create that explosive play. Wonderful offensive instincts, great skill set, good vision, and speed. They really do have it on the edge. So if they can find those moments, they will back themselves to take some tries.
Absolutely.
I think from an offensive point of view, as you pointed out, like, the key is to catch them when they can. They are going to have to be somewhat patient.
They will.
Like,
this is flinging it around willy-nilly. They will be gobbled up.
Oh yeah, Ireland are physical, and they're going to have to
be concerned by some of their showings, not in the Six Nations last year, but against the mighty pack of Argentina that they faced. With a kind of similarly, their Lions were missing, and they were like a changed team and a little younger team, and they managed to scrape a draw by being just clinical enough with no ball in the first game, but then the second game, kind of Argentina adjusted, and they were just too strong for them. It was a test level kind of forward pack that was just bullying a younger kind of Wales side, and they're obviously a few months on from that. They've had more games since, but obviously what happened to the All Blacks, Tane Basham was putting his hand up going, I'm amazing as a number 7, and the Kiwi commentators were impressed, but it was because they were losing almost every battle that their 7 was the most combative, scrappy guy in there making plays against the run of play. So they can't allow themselves to be blown away by what is a very, very dynamic, barnstorming Irish pack.
So it comes from the kind of flow that they want to generate in the game.
Yeah.
So obviously Wales aren't a team that's mad into phase play, into like they don't really care about.
If it goes 10 phases plus, you probably just fail to score the try.
Exactly.
Phase 3.
They're not really interested in 6 or 7 phases. They're interested in little explosive attacks off set piece, which are going to be so important. Getting that set piece right, and then for the most part, if Ireland are swallowing them up on the inside, getting rid of the ball, they're going to kick. They should all 3 of those scrum halves aren't brilliant kickers of a ball. Liam Williams and Dan Biggar are brilliant kickers of a ball. Getting those guys into positions where they can make the killer kick, be it for territory or to recover, as they love to do, putting the bombs up. That's going to be huge. Testing Hugo Keenan, testing whoever Ireland have put on those wings, putting clever little kicks in, trying to use their height and skill advantage on the edge and get those guys involved that way. All of those creative kicks early doors will be hugely important for them. And then on the other end, they're going to be kicking a lot of ball because Ireland are more physical than them. Can they disrupt Ireland? And that's huge. Can they just remove the flow from Ireland's game? They need to stymie them.
It's a huge thing not focusing on messers who are missing, but guys like when Tipperick and Alan Wynne-Jones are in there for them, just how disruptive those guys are on the defensive line-out from their point of view, as in disrupting Ireland's set-piece ball. And the line-out is such a key weapon for Ireland to launch off of. Every team generally, but Wales at their very best are such a combative, counter-striking line-out. And it was telling in the World Cup that South Africa were statistically the best line-out, and the only team to nick one on them was Wales in the semi-final, and they managed to do that even to that level of a high level of line-out operating. They will look to be competitive in that area. In the breakdown, same as I was citing, getting hands in, not being illegal, as in not falling on the wrong side and getting pinned, but just winning the contact enough or being a little slow enough that your hands are still in there, that you're just creating, turning what should be a 1.5 second ruck into a 3 second ruck, or what should be a 3 second ruck into a 5 second ruck, and the knock-on effect thereafter of just being just causing that little disruption to tempo that allows you to get in the faces of your opponents.
Yeah, absolutely. All of those, and playmaking as well, from the likes of Basham and who they go with in the back row. Can they generate turnovers? But also just, can they get Ireland doubting themselves? They've been posting those videos of them doing their altitude training. They always believe they're fitter and stronger and harder working than anyone that they come up against. Not necessarily stronger, but fitter and harder working for sure. And so getting off the line, shutting what Ireland are doing down, chop tackles, hands in there, slowing what Ireland are doing up and making them inaccurate, that's going to be so key for them. And that turns the game. What they really want to turn the game into is one where Ireland are disrupted and kicking a lot themselves. They want Ireland to revert back to that team that's a little slow, a little unsure of themselves, that's
kicking
just
for 50-50s, because if they can create that where both teams are looking for 50-50s, that's good for them, because they think with the speed advantage, with the more penchant for grabbing those tries out wide, that they will be the ones to be able to capitalise on those bouncing balls. And very often when they do nick results in Dublin, although you were saying it hasn't happened for a wee while, it does come down to moments like that, just creating little toss of a coin that the Welsh scrum half is there to capitalise, or the Welsh winger's there to capitalise, and for frustration for us to watch, but it is a true policy for a good reason. They have the capacity to do that in that back line and through those loose forwards who can run, or the likes of Adam Beard, who operates as a loose forward at his best when he's slotting into that offensive shape and pulling strings out wide. You'll want to see guys like him take a leadership role, both in that and in terms of he's going to have to step up and call his own lineouts in terms of they're being clean on their own.
Yeah, they made him vice captain. They want him to step up and be Alan Wynne-Jones in the absence of Alan Wynne-Jones, and we'll see if he's up to the job. And then one final note as well on the defensive end is just that obviously the key work on for them really is their outside defending, their midfield defending. It's the reason that Tompkins isn't just a permanent starter in there, is because he's so disastrous on the defensive end.
Great with ball in hand when he's there and throwing some lovely passes, but then it's similar to what Scotland were looking like with Hugh Jones there as well, where it was it looks amazing going forward. He looks great carving that English midfield apart, but then it's also that's a very soft first phase try to allow through the midfield.
They need to, whether they pick Tompkins or Josh Adams or whoever else is, they need to use the speed advantage and trust those guys to make reads. And I think crucially, you want really to take some of the options away from Sexton. You know that most of what they're doing is going to flow through Sexton. You know if they're trying to work it to the wider pot of forwards, they're likely going to do that through Sexton with a loop play or something like that. So you need to get in his place. And a lot of teams will make the mistake of trying to hit him, trying to come out of the line and put a shot in on him, and he'll usually dump it off to the best, to his inside man, his easy option. That guy will make solid meters. You'll either get called for hitting him late,
you might get carded for it or something.
Exactly, or something like that, but you won't get the positive play that you're looking for. He's too good, he's too experienced. He's not going to let you get a man and ball unless you time it just perfect.
Unless the whole defence is doing its job such that he doesn't see any options and then runs into
that's contact. You want to take his easy option away first. You want to ideally take away his second easiest option with a bit of a blitz on his outside, and then you want Sexton having to make the decision to take contacts. And even though he'll do it and he'll fancy himself to make a good line break or something like that, he's a little slower and he's not he's of that age where you don't really want him taking as many contacts as possible, and if Wales are forcing him at the bottom of rucks in Ireland's offensive sequences, everything will slow down.
Indeed.
And that for sure has got to be the defensive plan for them.
Part of that involves shutting down some of the other key players who slot into 10 effectively, which is the likes of Tyke Furlong. The guys are going to have to be on that kind of watch, because they were very potent towards the tail end of last season. It's dealer's choice how you deal with guys like that, but part of it is just fronting up. You're going to be away from home. It's going to be a raucous crowd. Like, what you can't afford is in the first quarter little soft soap tackles are falling off guys like himself or Daragh or Conan, because they will take that soft shoulder if you give it to them, and then you might get steamrolled. So it's arriving to the pitch is so important for that.
For sure.
And then from there you're right in saying keep your cohesion. Don't be going gung ho shooting up for Sexton to go, I'm gonna break him here. It's like, oh no, the ball's gone behind me. That is a recipe for looking silly. But if you can arrive to the pitch as a whole unit, which is what Wales will be looking to do, and then you can start to win a few contacts, lose a few contacts, as you say, get the Irish doubting themselves, get them kicking, and then you're slowly creating the Welsh picture to success in this game.
Absolutely. Now listen, with all that said, how do you feel this one's going?
I feel that, as we were caveating all of this stuff about Wales and all this, and I am fearful of Wales, and I'm fully aware of the capacity of either side to win this one. I think Ireland at home are favourites in pretty well, certainly on the back of beating the All Blacks last year. Pretty much anyone apart from the Springboks, I think we're favourite at home going in. We don't know about the Springboks yet, we haven't seen that, but I think Ireland are favourites just on virtue of it being at home. I think it's that tight. I also think with form, just both club form and in terms of international form, I think Ireland are the team with a little bit more at the minute, and they'll probably win it by about a score, maybe a bit more. I would like to see it be a bit more, because I'd like to see that offence keep going. But Wales are just a tough team to shake loose like that, and I think Wales will still grab tries and still be in that fight. But I think Ireland at home with that crowd will see it done. Yeah,
I think I agree. I think I just like the matchup of Ireland's forward pack in the tight areas against the Welsh forward pack a little too much, and I like the matchup of the Irish offence against this Welsh defence. I just think those 2 points of difference will be too much for Wales to overcome, especially in Dublin. And I think the smart money is on Ireland for a win this week. Here's hoping anyway. Those are the 2 Irish perspectives there. But let us know what you think. If you have anything different on that game, let us know in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to give it a like, share with your friends, and leave a comment down below as well. We really do want to hear your thoughts.